a horrible economy is crushing Chinese workers, and it's bringing them to the brink. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Are you an experienced journalist? Do you know lots and lots about China? And would you like to write for China Uncensored? Because we're hiring. More info on the link below or go to chinauncensored.tv/jobs. So, working in China sucks. Of course, working sucks in a lot of places, but few of them reach install anti-jumping nets outside the windows to keep the employees from offing themselves level of suckitude. Employers in China mistreat employees all the time. These workers in 2019 are being punished by their bosses for not making their end-of-year targets. And China's extreme 996 work culture that forces people to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week or more to stay afloat certainly doesn't help. But people put up with it. Why? Because China's declining population and economic woes means that competition for jobs is brutal. You see, where in some countries a labor shortage might mean that workers can demand higher salaries and still get jobs, in China, it just means that workers have to work even harder just to keep their jobs. And the pandemic only made things worse. With the economy slowing down, competition for jobs has never been harder. And to illustrate just how hard it is to just get a job, one Chinese worker told the New York Times about how she shelled out more than $5,000 and spent 20 months doing little but studying, all for a government position that paid less than half what she used to make, since working for the government is seen as the safest option for job security. Wow! I've been doing this show for over a decade, and that was the first time I've ever heard the Chinese government and safe used in the same sentence. I don't know whether I should gag or make a wish. But if you ask me, that's hardly an upgrade. Never mind that working for the government is basically serving a genocidal communist regime. Her new monthly salary of only $420 sucks, even by Chinese standards. $420 isn't a monthly salary, it's a tip Elon Musk would leave for the lulz and the memes. This Chinese worker is just one of many workers who find themselves having to settle for less pay. One former marketing executive told the Wall Street Journal how after his last employer went out of business during the pandemic, he now has a job that only pays about $500 a month after taxes, about 20% of what he earned at his peak. Meanwhile, he has a $770 a month mortgage, among other expenses. So he took an extra gig at a coffee shop that pays less than $4 an hour. I'd say he could always move back in with his parents, but that also assumes his parents weren't killed by China's disastrous zero-COVID policy. Money matters are even worse for rural workers, which make up a considerable chunk of China's workforce. Scott Rozelle, a senior fellow at Stanford University, found that rural Chinese families on average currently earn only 60% of what they made in 2019 before COVID. Unemployment may be part of that, but if it is, you won't find out from official Chinese unemployment statistics since the CCP doesn't include rural migrant workers in the data. Yeah, they don't like harvesting bad data. The only harvesting the CCP cares about is harvesting the organs of dissidents, which makes for the bleakest version of Stardew Valley ever. But given that China's National Bureau of Statistics officially states that rural workers make up 295 million out of China's 780 million workers in 2022, this isn't something China should be ignoring. Urban or rural, people are earning a lot less money while also working more hours than ever. This absolutely wrecks people's health. According to research conducted by the Chinese Sleep Research Society, more than 300 million Chinese have sleep disorders, and nearly 40% of adults have insomnia. That was back in 2016. I'm willing to bet that has gone way up since the pandemic. Wait, maybe those aren't anti-jumping nets, they're hammocks. Those bosses are considerate after all. Lack of sleep has become such a problem that there's an entire economy around it. If someone in China offers you money to sleep with them, odds are it isn't sexual. They just want you to knock them unconscious with a pipe so they can finally get some decent rest. Young workers especially are so sleep deprived that many are turning to singing bowls to combat sleeplessness and stress.
每一次就觉得，哎，这次能不能睡着？然后躺在那儿就睡着了。躺在那儿就睡着。工作压力特别大， 我有时候因为工作忙或者是焦虑的问题，我可能2、3点才会睡觉，然后但是早上起来7点就得爬起来去上班。
一个是焦虑，一个是压力大，还有一个是失眠，就是这3个是我们听到最多的、出现最频繁的3个词。放松、幸福感、快乐，好像现在都是变成了一件奢侈品的感觉。大多数人他已经忘记了如何去获得它。
And here I thought owning a home was a luxury. Young homeowners in China see people sleeping on the street and think, lucky. People are paying good money for this, and for good reason.
如果我们不把这个费用去疗愈我们的情绪，可能花在医院上，它也是一笔不菲的费用。
Communist utopia. It's pretty sad that Chinese workers are pushed into this situation, but they've got to make their money somehow. Getting paid, though, that's another matter entirely. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. Chinese workers work brutally long hours and get little to no sleep for minimal pay. But some people can't even seem to get their hard-earned cash. Teachers and civil servants complain about delayed salary payments and reduced benefits. So do doctors, the same doctors who have to deal with the insomnia epidemic. Here you can see doctors perch in window frames and protest over unpaid wages in Sichuan province. This is bad for the CCP, because without doctors, who's going to harvest all those organs? So why is the situation in China so grim for workers? Well, as usual, at least part of the blame lies in the Chinese Communist Party. Despite what Chinese state-run media may suggest about the economy, the CCP has done a very shoddy job of handling it, before, during, and after COVID. Chinese authorities stated in 2021 that the 996 work culture was illegal, but enforcement is another matter. And the economy just keeps getting worse and worse. Rather than see an economic boom in 2023 and beyond, like people predicted, China continues facing a disastrous property market crisis, crippling debt problems, and tumbling exports. It's kind of like being promised a PlayStation for Christmas, but instead all you get is the knowledge that you're never going to be able to retire. Feliz Navidad. Especially doesn't help that China's aggressive bullying and crackdowns on private enterprises have a lot of people nervous, which in turn scares off foreign companies from directly investing into China. In short, Chinese workers have the short end of the stick with a disastrous Chinese economy. I'd say this is a nightmare, but you'd have to actually be able to get some sleep to have nightmares. Chinese workers are sick of it. The CCP's policies have led to things like the lie flat movement, which is simultaneously symbolic and the only way to get some Z's while protesting, the let it rot movement, and the involution movement. All of these were terms that trended online, in case you don't know what they mean. Another way to put it is that Chinese workers, especially the youth, went from putting very little effort into work to not caring whatsoever about work to feeling locked in an endless cycle of self-flagellation. The experience of being locked in competition that one ultimately knows is meaningless. Basically, a never-ending spiral towards nihilism. You know it's bad when Chinese workers don't enjoy reading Nietzsche because they consider him too upbeat. Now that feeling of pointlessness is turning into rage. Anger is definitely boiling in China. In fact, 2023 saw a whole bunch of worker protests all over China, especially among manufacturers over things like wages. Why? People aren't happy making less and working more? Why can't you just be zen and be satisfied with your increasingly horrible lives and thank your leaders, actively ruining your futures from their castle fortress? According to the China Labor Bulletin, a Hong Kong nonprofit that tracks workers' movements in China, there's been a surge of manufacturing protests in China. By the end of 2023, the China Labor Bulletin reported almost 1,800 protests amid massive layoffs, reduced wages, unpaid wages, and business closures in the country. That's more than double the amount recorded in the previous year. Also keep in mind, the CCP is actively censoring things that it doesn't want people to look at. And not just this. Boy, it would sure make Xi mad if this were on a shirt conveniently available at ChinaUncensored.tv/merchandise. Some footage showing Chinese protests gets scrubbed. For example, when I tried to look at this particular footage of a July protest in Liaoning, I got this instead. Trust me, it was supposed to show a Chinese protest, not filtered Chinese thoughts. Also, this is further proof of how bad the economy is. She can't afford adult-sized clothes. She bought child-sized clothes, which barely cover her at all. The poor thing. But the point is, chances are there are a lot more protests that we're unaware of. Protests over the economy and working conditions in general could spell disaster for the CCP. It hinges its legitimacy on promising Chinese people that they would find economic prosperity as long as they submit to the party. The last thing it needs is too many people protesting, giving up on life, or even blaming the CCP for their woes. This should wake people up to the fact that communism, a system that claims to be for the workers, actually kind of sucks for the workers. When you live in communism, the closest thing you get to a safety net is one outside your office trying to keep you from offing yourself. Now I got a video I want to show you, but first, it's time for me to show some love to the people who make this show possible. The China Uncensored 50 Cent Army. Fans who support this show on patreon.com/China Uncensored. As my way of saying thanks, I'll answer their questions at the end of these episodes. Today's question comes from John Marcus Ellis. Chris, does Xi Jinping work for the CIA? But seriously, with your master's degree in music from NYU, why doesn't the CCP just bribe you with millions of dollars in record deals and concert tours? Maybe it could team you up with Lang Lang and a chorale of honeypot girls for a tour of American think tankies, or a China tour. You could open for a C-pop boy band. Ever think about flipping for UN? John, I have been very open about my willingness to be bought off, but China hasn't even tried. They're missing their bet. But so this is interesting. There might be a parallel universe where I did pursue a career in music after getting my master's in music composition from NYU. Yes, that's the thing I did. Yes, it was a devastating financial mistake. But since I was always interested in China, the idea of traveling to China and doing something with indigenous Chinese folk music did cross my mind, like a Bela Bartok of China. I bet the CCP would have been all over that idea. That's the kind of soft power propaganda they would love. Taking Chinese culture and twisting it into something for the party's benefit. While the CCP can't provide for the people, it does have loads of money to blow on soft power. So, somewhere there's an evil timeline Chris making some kind of crappy mashup of Western and Chinese music funded by the Chinese state. And I'm glad he isn't me. Thanks for your question and your support, John. And in my ongoing attempts to talk about controversial topics YouTube would otherwise censor, like Chinese social media, I've been hiding them in gaming content in my new show, Gamers Unbeaten. Help me beat the algorithm by clicking on this video about a new game that's Pokemon with guns. Second Amendment bros, eat your heart out. Click on that orange button to support us on Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.